In this exercise, we'll be taking this black and white image and colorizing it to make it look similar to the colored version. You should have downloaded these 3 files. I've got the one open already called Bottles BW, which of course is the black and white version. Let me open the other 2 files and we'll talk around this exercise a bit. I'm just going to go to File, Open, and I've got them tucked away already. I'll open the bottle color, and I actually can, with my Shift key, select more than one item at a time. So this one's already open, so we'll click Open for the other 2. And we can see the 3 tabs up at the top here. Now, if I wanted to see them side by side, I could go up and kind of change the arrangement of this layout under Window, Arrange. You see you have a number of options here. I'm just going to say Tile All vertically. And there you can see that they are side by side. I'm probably going to eliminate this middle one here in a little while, but I just wanted to show you kind of what we're going for. If you look at this middle image, we'll take this black and white, we'll derive the colors from this flat colored label art, and then we'll apply it to the black and white, and it'll look something like this. Not 100% the same, but it'll look something like that. So now that I've shown you that, I'm going to close this middle file called Bottle Color. So what we're left with here is the bottles black and white and the beer label JPEG. Now I'm also looking over at my palettes, and I do want to make a little room, so it's not too hard to readjust your palettes, customize them if you will. I did start on Essentials, but I basically just want to have my color swatches and my layers available. So I'm just going to grab this whole bar, pull it out, and just delete it. And then I'll adjust my panels just to accommodate the layers, and we're good to go. Now to start with, I guess, we'll just sample some colors. I'm going to show you how you can sample some colors and save them in your swatches palette. If we go over to our eyedropper tool, and there are basically, let me see here, there's I guess 4 or 5 colors that we want to retain and repurpose. I'll just start at the top here. I'll sample that yellow. Yes, it does appear in as my foreground color chip, but what I want to do is I want to save it in my swatches. So I'll just go over to New Swatch, and I'll actually give it a name. I'll call it Jug Yellow. Okay, Jug Yellow. I can add it to a library. I'll leave that checked for now. We're not going to work with the library today, but I'll leave it checked. So ultimately, if I ever opened up Photoshop, these colors would still be there in the library. Let me click OK. And I don't know if you noticed, but the new color chip appeared in my swatches. So again, let's just go through the colors here. I guess I'll pick green next. Save that, and I'll call it Jug Green. Hit OK. And we'll go with the red here. We'll save that. Jug Red. Now, again, I'm kind of doing things in a assembly line method, if you will, repeating all similar tasks. I do believe that ultimately this speeds up the process, and time is money, as you know. Now, I will sample this blue out of the solid area of that logo. Save that. We'll call that Jug Blue. Okay. So now I've got my colors saved in my swatches palette, and I can start to apply them to the black and white image. When it comes to this semitone area here, I'll just sample them as I go, but I'm not going to save those swatches. Now the trick here, or the main part of this lesson, I guess, is we're going to be using a feature called ink modes, and they appear in our properties when we are on a paint tool. So if I go to my brush tool, and I'll just remind you, you can see the brush size right now, but if you look on your keyboards, the square brackets, right square bracket increases brush size, small square bracket, or left square bracket decreases brush size. Now if you want to get more specific, and you might want to have a look, go up to your palette, and it's the hardness that I'm more concerned with here, because the size I can change with my keyboard shortcuts. The hardness though is how soft or hard is that edge. I'm going to make it fairly hard actually, and I'm going to bring it, you know what, I'm going to bring it right to the top, 100%. I can hit my return key to close that panel. Now as I said, I'm going to use these colors and paint them with the brush. And I was referring to the ink modes, which is up here again in the properties. And if I click on here and I'll scroll down, you can see we have a big list of various things called ink modes. Basically, ink modes is how the color gets applied to the image. So I'll show you a couple of examples, then I'm going to share the best ink mode choices for the various colors. And it does really depend on what you're painting on, whether it's a dark surface or a light surface, semitone, etc. Now I'll just show you the normal mode for now, which is what it usually defaults to. And if I just paint over this image, it's just solid paint. So let me undo that. I think another thing I'm going to do actually, before I start coloring, is I will duplicate my layer so that I have sort of a backup, if you will, of that layer. If I just go and right click on the word background, I'll just choose duplicate layer, and I'll just call this colorized layer. Okay, and that's the layer I'll work on. Now let's go through a couple of other ink modes. Let's say multiply. Multiply, I don't know if you can tell, but it's almost like it's a sheet of acetate of that color going over what's behind. That may be useful for some of what we're doing, but right now I'm just going to undo that. I'll show you just a couple more and then we'll just get down to applying them. We have overlay, which actually only adopts the color. It's not like it's literally painting over, so it's actually a good one, I think, for our exercise that we may very well use. And you can see it will respond differently depending how dark and light the areas are. So it doesn't affect white and it doesn't affect black, but the midtones get seriously affected. I will undo that, and maybe we'll look at screen. Go up here, screen. And you can see here that screen basically, it's almost like we're projecting light through it. I think screen might work well for the Jughead logo here, but for the other areas it's not really working. But you can see the effect there as well. Again, I will undo that, and we'll set this back to normal as a starting position. Okay, so I think where we'll begin is the red part of the label. You can kind of see it up here in this top area. So I can move this over as well. I can always negotiate the borders here. And I will zoom in. So I'm going to just go Command plus on the Mac here would be Control plus on the PC. And isolate and center that red area. Now here's what I propose to do. I will use my brush. Think of it like I'm coloring in a coloring book. And I'm going to do the edges with the brush. Then I'm going to use my Polygon lasso tool basically to go in and select the large areas. And just as we're applying color with the modes with the brush, you can also do that with the fill command, as I will demonstrate when we get to that. So let me start by shrinking the brush size here. Choosing the red, so I'll go to my swatches. There's the red. And I'll just clue you in right now. The one we're mostly going to use that will work well for most of the situations on this graphic is the color mode. So set mode to color. Make sure opacity and flow are set to 100 as they should be. And again, I might even zoom in a little farther here. I'm using my spacebar to move around. And I'll just start in this upper corner. Now, as you learned with the brush tools, the drawing tools, I can draw short, quick lines by shift clicking. I can hold my shift key down and click. I'm actually going to decrease the size here to get very accurate. Now I'm holding my shift key down, which allows me to draw short, straight lines. Now the nice thing when you're up against a white area is when you're using the color mode, white is white, so it doesn't really matter. I can kind of go a little bit over the edges, as you can see here, and it actually looks fine. So I'm not too concerned if I'm going into a straight white. So I'll click here again and click across, as you can see. Now I will increase the brush size temporarily, and this is going to go up and down as I need. Spacebar to move around. You can see here I can click here, and actually it makes sense to overlap a little bit into the white here so I capture it all. But you do see the highlight areas retain their tones as well as the dark areas. Now I'm just going to go around here and try to capture all of that red. This is the edge of the label right here. There's actually brown bottle coming down the edge here. So I feel comfortable overlapping that white area, which I will be painting yellow a bit later. And then I come down here and come across, and I'm just going to kind of go freehand a little bit here. And the idea here again is that I'm isolating this little area. So brush size decrease for this fine area. And it might even have been prudent to zoom in, but I can sort of see it all right here. Increase brush size again on the keyboard and carry on. Okay, spacebar to move around. I will use my shift key again to kind of draw these short straight lines. And decrease the brush to get along that sort of thin area. And then you're just going to see my brush expand and contract in size as I need it here. And I'm doing all that on the keyboard again. That's the square brackets. Alright, so let's go around this logo now. And if I have a thin area, of course, I can just fill that in there. Now I'm using my shift key once again. And anytime you see the page move, I'm using my space bar. Alright, so we'll go over here, and I guess I'll take care of this upper corner as well. Freehand. And since I've got a lot of straight lines here again, I will shift click. And along the bottom of this logo. Alright, so I'll just finesse around these wheat sheaths here. And I'm doing it freehand style. Alright. And we'll take care of this side. And this is all kind of freehand. And we'll just go around this Kings of Beer text. And if I need to get in tight, I'll zoom up and I'll just go in with a fine brush. Alright, so zoom up, decrease brush size, and carry on here. Again, it won't affect the white, and the blacks will stay black as well. I think a part of the lesson here is to realize that you do need to zoom in for accuracy and for tightness for small areas. And you can see me changing my brush size on the fly. I mean, it'd be impossible to be able to see this zoomed out, to see it accurately. So I am being fussy. It is about doing good work. Alright, this is probably the most fussy area right here that I've just done. Probably a good time to save this file as well. I'm going to do a save as. I don't want to actually write over my original file. I'll just call it CL, I guess, for color. COL. There you go. Okay, so I've saved the file as a new file. You can see how I've isolated or painted around the borders of the red area, if you will. I could easily go in with the brush and fill that all in too, but I wanted to share another method of colorizing here, another approach, if you will. So I'll use the selection tool, the Polygon lasso tool, and I will zoom up again here, and we'll isolate these areas that I missed. And again, the Polygon lasso tool is simply clicking to isolate the area. I'm going to show you a cool little shortcut too. On the Mac it's Option, on the PC it's Alt. If I Alt click, and start to drag, it temporarily turns into the lasso tool, so I can sort of freehand draw as well. So if I let go of that Alt key, again it becomes that elastic line that I can simply click to establish other points. So I'm almost done here, and then I come here and close that shape. And here we go, Edit Fill. And just like the settings we used on the brush, foreground color, change ink mode to color. And I will just set it to 100%. So here's the big deal, you change your blending mode to color. Using foreground color, I click OK, and there we go. I'll just go Command D to deselect, Control T on the PC. So I'll isolate this other unfinished area by simply isolating it with the Polygon lasso tool. Again, if I hold my my Alt key down, I can draw in a freehand style. When I let go, it becomes the clickable Polygon lasso tool. Okay, we're getting there. Close that shape. Now you see that I've actually captured Kings of Beer. I probably could have gotten away, we're going to find out, I may have to undo this step, but I probably could have gotten away with not isolating that area, but let's find out. I'm going to do a fill with the blending mode set to color, and I'll just see how that pans out here. So it's already set to color because that was the last setting, so I don't need to go and change it. Click OK, and boom. You know what? I'm going to undo that. And with my Polygon lasso tool, I'm going to go to the subtract from selection. And I will come in here and kind of cut a hole out of that, if you will. It's always worth trying. You can always undo or step backwards if it didn't pan out. But if it does, you save time again. There we go. Okay, so I've worked around that Kings of Beer. I've got a hole in my selection area, if you will. Just to be sure I don't screw up next time, I'm going to change this back to new selection. And we'll go up to Edit Fill. Same settings, color, okay. And there we go. I'm going to deselect now. And there is the red section done. Let me just save my file. Keyboard shortcut for save. Now, I took a lot of time and I actually completed the red section so that you could comprehend the different approaches using your selection tools versus the brush tools. I'm not going to actually make you watch me complete the whole thing. I don't want to waste your time, but let's talk about some of the different ink modes that possibly we could use for the various situations. Now, we're going to approach yellow next, and I do have some yellow stripes, and these little wheat sheaths are yellow, and the text down here is yellow. So let's just talk around that a bit. I'll start by selecting the yellow color chip, and I guess we'll go to our brush tool. And if I leave it at color mode right now, I'm just going to demonstrate what it will do. If you look at the top, it's not doing what I want, which is to say turn that white stripe to yellow. It's actually affecting everything almost but the white stripe. Let me undo that. And if you think logically what's happening here, again, it's primarily a white stripe. It does get a little darker on the edges, but if I want to apply something to a very light area, it makes sense that maybe I could use the color mode Darken. So that's what I will choose, Darken. Now, even though it's yellow, it's darker than the white. I will decrease the brush size here to kind of fit the line. But if I paint along here, you can see what's happening. It's doing an excellent job. It's turning that white line into the yellow. And it's not really affecting the dark gray or the red because those are darker tones. So if I click here, shift click to get my straight lines, and click over here and complete it like that, that works quite well. So that's the yellow. Now again, I could go in here with the Kings of Beer, with that, set the darken mode, and we should be good. So you can go in here and change all of these. Now I'm looking at the wheat sheaths here. It may have to be dealt with differently on this side because this is actually fairly dark gray. But let's go over here on this side and take a look. Now that does work, and it works well. So we'll just go in there and fill that in. And let me try it on here. See, it's not working so well there because it's too dark. So you know what? Probably going back to color mode would work on that left side. And you'll just kind of need to, with your eye, analyze the situation. So if I go color, yes, there we go. Now I would need to be careful with my brush size because I would be affecting what are the red areas. But basically, go in. If you need to zoom up, prudent to do so. Spacebar to move around. For accuracy, you should zoom in when you need to. Okay, so there's the yellow areas, how I would deal with the yellow areas. I set the mode primarily to darken for what are the light areas. And then again, back to color if the situation calls for it. I'll just do a little touch up here on the bottom with the text. My brush is fairly large, but again, the area around the text is also quite dark. So I'm pretty confident, as you can see here, as I'm painting over it, it only affects the light areas, which is pretty sweet. Again, if I increase that brush size, I can do that bottom stripe as well, without too much consequence to the dark areas. You would have to be careful at the edge because there is white. So that's how we can deal with the yellow. Let's deal with the blue on the jughead label. So let me choose the blue. Now there are a few, so let's try a couple. Let me increase this brush size so we can really see what's happening, and I'll zoom up one level here. And if I try darken, obviously I know it's not going to give me the results. Let me try lighten. I'm not sure if that's going to give me what I want. And that's actually close, but unfortunately it doesn't work on those medium areas. It works quite well on these black areas. Now I'm kind of going over the border there a bit. So you may actually need to do a combination of techniques. I just undid that. Let's try a different one here. Let's try screen. Now screen seems to capture it all. The only issue with screen that I have, and screen is viable to use, but you just need to be careful when you're working with it. I'm on a single click here, and I know I'm going over the edges being sloppy, but I'll expect you to just narrow your brush size as you get to it. Screen does work, but the problem with screen is if I go over it again, so I'll deselect basically and I'll click again, it does tend to compound. So you kind of get one chance at that with the screen effect, but I do think that's probably the best one to sort of imitate the look that we have here. So let me undo that and step backwards. And maybe we'll try a couple more that I think might work. And you're going to need to trial and error these. In fact, you know what, a good exercise would be to set it to each one of these with a wide brush and just kind of scribble across the image and see what you're going to get out of each one. It's the best way to figure it out. Now if I try, let's say, hard light, that's not doing it. It's filling in the whites. If I try, let's say, color dodge. Now I'm just trial and error here. That's not working either. So I think screen was the best one. I would just need to be careful with my brush size so that when I go around the edge, I'm not going to be changing that red. Now here's an idea. Let me undo that as a solution. Isolate the area, then it doesn't become a problem. It will take a little more time, but let's say I had isolated the area. Now I'm just going to do a rough selection here. But if you have a selection made, your brushes will only affect what's within the selected area. So let's pretend that I did a beautiful selection around this. And I'm just going to chop it off right there. If I go in with my brush now, I can actually make the brush quite large. Or you know what, even better, I could do it with a fill. Let's try it with the fill. Edit fill, mode, screen, 100% foreground color, and boom. There you go. There's your solution right there. Select the area, isolate the area with your selection tool, and do it as a fill. Then you don't have that issue with the compounding that the screen mode happens to have as a side effect. Alright, so let me undo that. And actually I'll fill it. I'll just redo it here. So you can see it. I will deselect them. So pretend that I went around and I did a beautiful selection and I isolated that area. Let me just save that as I go. And to get the green, back to the color mode I would think, but let's try it and see. Choose the color to start with. Go in with my brush. Set it to color. And I would think, because at least on this side, because those what look like white stripes were actually fairly dark gray, that I would have to take some care with my brush size and go in there and yes, zoom up and be accurate about it. You can see when I go into the white area it affects it, and that's not what we want. We want a good job here. So that means brush size needs to be smaller, and if I need to shift click my way around to get these little corners, then that's what you have to do. And I am looking for accuracy on this particular assignment. I'm looking for quality work. The concepts are easy enough, but the exercise is to learn how to use your brushes and resize them as needed, or the other option of creating a selected area and filling it with the designated color mode. Now this halftone area, again, I could just use my eyedropper. Choose the darker tone. I'll just advise you choose the darkest of that light blue. With my brush, set the color. I can carefully come in here and start to paint. And you can see here that it does take on the color and it does retain the tone. Alright, and same for the red. Sample the darker part of that red. Back to my brush tool. Still set the color. And that should work, and it does work. So that's your assignment here, is to colorize the spear bottle. I do want you to colorize the little one in the background as well. And maybe just to conclude this, for the bottle itself, you can either sample a brown off that other image, or I'm just going to pick this medium brown here. And if we go in here and increase my brush size, I'm still on color. And that totally works. And again, because it's set the color, the white stays white, so I don't need to be too careful around the edges, but it's going to give it a little bit, I guess, of a coppery look, but that's fine for today. Alright, so I'm just loosely going over with my brush, set the color. That actually works well. And over here, if I want to do a straight line, click, shift click, and then continue back down here. Now the shadow will take on the color, so at the bottom you will need to be careful. There we go. Alright, so a bit crude at the end because I'm just rushing it. But again, your assignment is to use the color modes, the brush tool, and the selection tool using a fill with the color mode set to the desired mode. And I do want you to colorize this black and white image so that these labels do take on the same color scheme that was created in this flat colored art. And that's your coloring assignment for today.